Hey everybody, and today we're gonna check out my custom master grade RX78-2 2.0, the first Gundam that started them all. And I really like the design of this guy. I think the 2.0 is probably the best version of it ever so far. So I knew that I wanted to get this one. As soon as I saw it in the store, I was like, yep, that's the guy for me. So that being said, this was the very first model kit that I had ever airbrushed. I had done some spray cans with some other kits, but never an airbrush. There was just a lot to it that I didn't understand or know, and there's money that needed to be had to afford all the components. I didn't really go into anything with that, so I decided to kind of just table all of my model kit stuff for a few years. I decided to put it all away and say, you know what, there's more to this than what I'm capable of, so let's shelve it. And then years later, I did tons of research, and since I still had this guy in my backlog, I decided he's gonna be the first. And I have to say, for being the first time ever with airbrushing, I think I did a pretty good job. Nothing too crazy, but it got the job done, and you can tell that there is some shading and stuff going on, so I was pretty happy with the results. So let's just freaking get into it. So like I said, this was done many years ago. It was the first one, so try to forgive some of the issues with it. So I think the white came out pretty much perfect. It's a little bit on the grayer side, which is what I wanted. I figured that this was a show from 1979. The color balances are kind of weird in some of those old cartoons and animes. If you look at Transformers and Gundam and G.I. Joe and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, any type of the cartoons from that era, there's a lot of interesting color choices going on. Let's just say that. They're not very bright and vibrant, a lot of dull tones and stuff, so I figured going a little bit less white on this guy would work, and I was right. I think I just used the standard Mr. Color RX78 white, so I figured that'd be perfect, and I think that's the case. I think having it be a little bit on the grayer side than having it be a perfect white is the way to go with an RX78, and I'm happy with the results. The shading came out pretty solid, so what I did was I just primed everything up in gray. Didn't know anything about primers and all that, so everything was gray. And then I did pre-shading with black along the edges of the part, and then from there I just did the white highlighting and then shading around it. And while I do think this came out pretty solid, I did change up my style moving forward. I don't really do pre-shading anymore, I just do highlighting. I find that just having your entire base layer be the color and then just highlighting on top of that gets a little bit more of a cleaner result. Maybe it's just me, but I just kind of feel that way. So that being said, I think this guy actually looks very clean considering I just did pre-shading for all the white parts. I will say the weakest color on this one is the blue, and even to this day I find that blue is a tricky color to paint. I just don't know why. I find that the blue here is not bad, but it looks different in terms of the technique versus all of the other colors. It feels like the white, the gray, the yellow, and the red, they're all kind of shaded with a darker color, whereas the blue, it feels like it is a darker color, but then it's highlighted with a much brighter color. So there's an interesting offset in those tones there that I'm not the craziest about, but again, this was the first time ever, and I think for what it is, not too horrible. I'm trying to remember what I did for the blue. I probably just painted it regular old blue, or I think I did bright blue. I think I did the Mr. Color bright blue and just painted that straight out of the bottle, and I think I might have mixed up a couple of blues to highlight it. Either way, I don't think it came out bad. I just think it looks kind of weird on this specific kit because, like I said, all the other colors kind of look like they were done one way, and then only the blue was done with a different technique. I think if all the other colors looked like they were more highlighted rather than shaded like the blue is, things could have fit more cohesively, but, you know, it's not a big deal. Like I said, at the end of the day, this looks great on this shelf. The red, I think, looks pretty perfect. I don't know, man. I feel like this red, I just had never been able to replicate. This is way before I started taking pictures and recording and all that stuff, so I have no clue how I did any of that. I'm just going based off what I remember. But in terms of this red, I don't know. I don't know what I did, but it's so far one of the best red paint jobs I personally think that I've ever done. I've done a lot of, I mean, it's Gundam. There's red everywhere on all of them, so I've done a lot of red. I don't know, man. It's like lightning in a bottle. I just could not replicate this one. I think the rest look good. There's just something about this first one that I think I just got it right, and unfortunately, like I said, didn't record or take picture or take notes of what I did. Something to consider moving forward for sure. In terms of the yellow, this I was actually really disappointed at first, but over time I've grown to love how the yellow came out on this kit. I primed everything up in gray, just kind of not knowing what was what and just figuring everything out for the first time, using the gray as a primer and then putting a kind of mustardy dark yellow on top and then highlighting it with a much lighter yellow over it. I didn't like how it was so dull. You know, it's yellow. I wish that it came out a little bit brighter. Years later, now that I'm looking at it in hand, hand. I actually really like this yellow. I'm not 100% sure if I've been able to replicate it the same, so I'm just gonna have to hold on this one until I can figure it out. Like I said, all the other kits, they look great for their own reasons, but there's just something about some of the colors I did on this first one that, I don't know, I just was trying things out and it worked, and I just don't know what I did and can't seem to figure it out again. I've tried out different combinations of highlighting and shading with yellow, and I feel like nothing's quite hit this one yet. Very happy with the results with this one. The gray. I think this gray looks pretty freaking solid. I'm very proud of myself. So what I did was, there's about 3 different types of gray going on here. The inner frame I did with, and I think this was just standard Mr. Color Gundam inner frame gray, which is not the greatest. I'm gonna be honest, I don't like it. Maybe it's just me. I don't think this is a good inner frame color. It looks just so boring. To be fair, I did top coat this with a flat coat. Didn't know anything, kind of just went with what I was hearing. So I top coated even the inner frame metallic parts with a flat coat, and that definitely had an effect in terms of the, shininess and everything, but it still was just like a very boring, nothing special type of gray. So that's just something to keep in mind. I will say, I do remember not being crazy about the inner frame for this one, but also just kind of being like, whatever, it's fine. From there, the gun and the shield, I did with a different set of gray. I wanted to include some shading there and give it some differentiation. I did probably just black, if I had to guess. So I masked off the inside of the shield, which again, very happy about, but I wanted that to be a little different and not the greatest. It's kind of sloppy if you look at certain parts in terms of how I applied the tape and everything, but you'll never notice it from any angle because it's so microscopic, so who cares? It looks great. Painted those in black, the gun and the shield in black, went over it with a dark gray. I think I mixed up a couple of different dark grays together to highlight everything, and it looks good. Don't know what to tell you. It looks amazing. I love looking at it. This beam rifle looks immaculate. The shield looks pretty solid. This is supposed to be the original old school Gundam, and just because this was my first time ever doing everything, the way it all came together, it really has that older vibe. The techniques I was using back then are kind of dated for today's standard, which works for this particular design, so I'm very happy about it. I think the beam rifle and the shield just looks so great with that two-tone gray and the highlighting and the shading. I love it. I love seeing that, especially with the rifle being pretty much one color, there's a lot going on and your eye can pick up on it, so very happy about that. And then lastly, for the third gray was the hands. So I had picked up the Robot Spirits Gundam RX78 that had come out about the same time that I had done this one, so I used that as a reference, and I noticed that the hands were much different from the rest of the inner frame gray. They had their own special type of gray to them, so I decided to consider them as outer armor parts and give them their own lighter gray, and it does stick out. If you look at the hands and you look at the rifle, there's a significant difference in the shading and coloring between the hand gray and the rifle gray and the inner frame gray. So all 3 of them next to each other look different, and I love that. I love that separately you probably can't tell, but as soon as they're all touching and they come together, you can see it. There is a difference, and that's what I wanted. I love the subtleties of picking slightly different shades of a color and putting them together, because you'd be surprised how well that makes a huge difference, especially when they're touching. I wanted to get a little bit fancy. I still didn't know much of what I was doing, but I wanted to add a little bit of flair just to change it up, because the whole point of doing a model kit is to customize it and pick out things that you think would work best. I saw that we had a couple of pistons here. The parts are all separated, so you might as well take those pistons out and add different colors. Why are we going to make them all the same when the pieces aren't even connected? You might as well change it up. So I decided to try out Mr. Color Copper for the back of the ankles for those piston parts. They look okay. I have to say, they look like a brand new penny, and it looks freaking shiny, and it looks like metal. Like, I'm looking at it in hand right now, and it is just there. I have to put on sunglasses. There's like a glare in my eyes just from staring at this thing at the right angles. And then for the inside of the pistons, I decided to make that just standard silver, and there you go. I had a good time of it. If you add just subtle changes to things, you're gonna get a whole new depth of dimension. So now, unfortunately, the eyes look pretty damn terrible, and there's just no getting around that. They look bad. Don't get too close because you're gonna notice, but as long as we keep a distance, they don't look the worst. But big changes were made after I did this one. This was a big learning piece for me. So what I did for the eyes was I painted them black, right? Like I normally do. I paint the eyes black, so that way they have the black eyeshadow around the actual, I don't know, pupils, irises, whatever you want to call the cameras that they have for eyes. For the actual eyes themselves, I think I went with metallic yellow. I think that's what I did, because the eyes themselves are yellow, which is so unique, and that was a great choice. What was not a great choice was trying to dip a paintbrush into a bottle straight up and then just painting it on a part. You'll learn real quick that paint does not work well with a brush. You gotta add in some thinner just to help smooth things over. So it came out look a little clumpy. You can't tell because I did a good job of just keeping everything in the lines, which is nice. If you look up close and personal, especially when the light is shining on it, you can see there's a bit of clumpiness to it that, oof, this is not looking good. We're not winning any GBWCs with this one. Let me just say that right now. Moving forward, I learned that, okay, hand brushing, not the way to do things. So I learned how to do some masking and reverse panel wash and stuff like that, some techniques to help smooth things over. And now all the eyes on my kits moving forward are bright, shiny, even, and best of all, smooth. They do not look lumpy and clumpy. Panel lining was extremely basic on this one. I just knew about black panel liner ink, so I just had black panel liner and just did that. Nothing too crazy, just because on some of these 2.0s, the physical designs of the armor are pretty basic. As you can see, there's just a lot of smooth parts with a couple of little bits here and there picked out, and that's just what's to be expected from the original RX78. I mean, it was from the 1979 series. That was very simplistic in terms of their animation. It's not like they're going to be freaking broken up panel lines everywhere. This isn't a vert car, all right? So this is a 2000, I think, what, 8? This came out in 2008. Back then, seemed extremely advanced. 2.0, seeing that on the box, I was like, wow, this is a 2.0. They enhanced it. This is the perfect version now. Which I still stand by. This is the perfect version now. This has been in my collection for quite a while. He has taken some beatings. Unfortunately, some of the parts are not the original. So, for example, you probably can't tell because of the lighting and everything, but the V-fin on this one is a little different. It's much brighter because I just didn't get the shading the same. I lost the original V-fin, picked up another one, and then just tried my best to replicate the paint job. And unfortunately, I added a little bit too much white, so now it doesn't have quite that grayness to it. So it does stick out a little. Not the biggest deal. Who freaking cares? The back left beam saber, the hilt broke off. I can leave it there. It sits there, but it's not going to press in. It broke off in the beam, I don't know, javelin, the spear thing. That thing is so freaking cool. I wish I didn't break it. So sad. I do have another one. Like I said, I bought a whole nother kit. Some of these parts broke, got lost, stuff like that. So I had picked up a whole nother kit. So eventually one day I will bust out some of those parts just to replace some of the parts on this one. For now, it's not the biggest deal. That's why I didn't include it. Same thing with the bazooka. Parts broke on that. You'll notice in a lot of my videos that there's a bunch of pieces missing from the kits themselves just because I'm the kind of guy that I build it, I paint it, I pose it, we're done. I don't mess with it really that much. Occasionally, I might swap out some parts here and there if I think that the pose could use some freshening up. For the most part, they kind of have the standard iconic poses that they have. That's what I like about them. That's what I set them up with, and I call it a day. So if there's like all these extra guns and missiles and stuff like that aren't directly attached to the piece itself, maybe I'll paint them and stuff and put them away for later, but sometimes I'll just be like, we'll save this for another day, because you never know. Maybe I want to save those pieces and we'll do a custom. There you go. So I did build and paint the core fighter for this guy, and I was so excited to have that. I thought that was a cool little inclusion with this. The problem is they designed it where you can't put this guy together without the core lander being in the chest unit. That's part of the connection there. I didn't realize that when I first bought that. It's fine. It's not a big deal, but it looked really good. I was very happy with how that looked. They did a great job. Bandai did a great job in making that core fighter. I did a great job of painting it, and now you'll never see it because he's just trapped inside the Gundam, because why am I going to have just the core fighter on display with half a Gundam? Why couldn't you just include just one solid or two solid pieces that clash together? You just have it sit there inside the Gundam. That would have been nice, but whatever. One thing I learned about painting and thinner and all that is paint thinner eats plastic like crazy. You got to be careful with that stuff. Unfortunately, I got a little bit of paint in there and messed it up, so I literally dipped the entire clear piece into paint thinner to get all the paint off that I accidentally got on, and when I pulled it out, it was like acid. It was just melted. The whole thing was still in the same shape, and the texture was just rough. It was like, oh my goodness. I'm like, glad we did that right off the bat so I can learn that right away and never do that again. Oh my goodness, what an experience. And one last little creative decision that I decided to make myself was for the Vulcans. They're gonna have yellow, they're gonna have white, they're gonna have gray. There's no consensus on what color the Vulcan should be for this guy. I said, screw it, let's just make them yellow. It'll make it pop a little more, add a little bit of more variation to the design, and I think it came out great. I think out of the box, that part is white. It was yellow in some pictures, it was white in others, and it was gray in others. So I went with yellow, thought it looked the coolest, and I stand by it. Still looks good. I don't think I would make it different to this day. But anyways, guys, thank you for checking out this video. This was a big one. The very first model kit I had ever airbrushed, and it was a big experience for me. It was a good jumping off point. Many years years later, I'm able to put out some pretty solid work that I'm proud of. It starts with the first step. So anyways, guys, thanks for stopping by, and we'll see you again. Peace.